Chapter 27. Relativity. Mo sneaked out of the house after dessert when everyone was too full to notice her disappearing. She made her way to the backyard, which was filled with her grandma's ever-growing collection of plants. She took a seat on the bench, relieved to finally have some peace and quiet. Dinner had been a nosy and loud affair that was in reality just an interrogation. She loved her family. She missed them dearly when she was away at CIT. She was always excited to go home and see them, but she couldn't deny the fact that they drove her insane. They had no concept of personal boundaries and wanted to know every detail of her life. She couldn't imagine bringing anyone home to meet them. She tried to picture Blaze sitting at the dinner table and talking to her parents. She couldn't quite see it clearly in her mind. Blaze felt out of place in her childhood home, in her Lola's garden, and she didn't know why. "Are you itching to get back to school yet?" Uncle Felix asked as he took the seat beside her on the bench. "When I was in college and I had to come home, I lasted about 3 days before I was considering swimming to campus if I had to." She bit back a smile. "I'm not quite there yet. Let me know. I'll drive you on my bike if we have to. We can make it a road trip." Uncle Felix smiled. "It's nice to have you back, Nay. I'm glad to be home." She meant it too. There was never quite anything like being inside her family's house. She knew Bay Valley, an internal map made of her memories written deep inside of her. She knew how long it would take to walk from the house to the beach, and how far the beach was to her old high school. "It must be less exciting than New Welch," Uncle Felix remarked. "They seem to have a lot going on there at the moment. New heroes and villains." "Electric and Sons Park," she supplied. "Please tell me you're not dating one of them," he joked. "We talked about dating supers." "I'm not dating either of them." She hadn't even met Sons Park. Her uncle was joking, but still the thought of her dating a superhero or supervillain was absurd. It would be like dating a rock star or a circus performer. It was too insane to even consider. Uncle Felix gave her a look. "In case it happens, you turn them down and you come home. We know what happens when you date supers." "Not every relationship with a super ends in divorce," she reasoned. "Just because you and your ex-wife didn't work out, doesn't mean all romances with supers will end in heartbreak. Heroes and villains don't get happy endings. It's the price we pay." "Price for what?" "For being extraordinary." He shook his head. "You can't be a hero and have a good personal life. That's unfair. You have to lose something." "You make it sound like Susanna died. She lives on this street. And she still won't take me back," he exclaimed, as if Susanna would hear him from down the street. "Even when she knows we belong together." "Give it up, Felix," Mo's dad called out from inside the house. "Never." Her uncle turned back to Mo and wagged a finger.
"No dating supers.
Date ordinary boys and live a happy life." "But what if I want to date someone as cool as the Silver Jaguar?" "Tough luck. No one is as cool as me." He smiled and got to his feet. "Duty calls. I have to go on patrol. Remember what I said, Nay." She watched her uncle leave. He would change into his suit somewhere and be off fighting bad guys. She had idolized him as a child and was honored to be related to him. After 20 years of being a hero, her uncle was a constant in Bay Valley and the surrounding towns. He was as much part of the internal map like everything else. It was a slow day. Eli saved a construction worker from falling to his death and helped little kids find a lost kitten. Eli didn't know how to tell Mr. Carlyle that 2 people knew about his secret identity. He decided to come clean and brace himself for the consequences. He flew to Carlyle Manor, landing outside the back door. He knocked and the elderly butler let him to Mr. Carlyle's office. He waited for a few terrifying minutes before his mentor entered the room. His mentor's fingernails were painted different colors. "My grandkids are over," Mr. Carrollsell explained with a smile. "This is Stacy's work. It's nice." It looked messy, but he wasn't going to critique a little girl's handiwork. Mr. Carlyle continued to smile. He said, "I miss moments like this with my kids. I was so focused on being Chromium that by the time I realized it, they were adults." Eli stayed silent as his mentor continued. "I don't want to miss out on my grandkids too, and that's why I'm retiring. I'm going to be 60 next year. I've give more than enough of my life to this." And Eli was meant to be his replacement, the successor to his legacy. Guilt almost made him nauseous. He confessed, "I need to tell you something, Mr. Carlyle." "What's going on?" Eli paused, afraid that he was really doing this, before he explained about what happened with Tadashi and Catherine. He left out details about Catherine and her secret identity, but kept the gist of the conversations. Mr. Carlyle appeared calm and didn't seem dismayed. Eli didn't know whether he preferred calm over anger. Your cover is blown, Mr. Carlyle said. You didn't hide your suit well enough despite my advice. Eli swallowed and nodded. I'm sorry, Mr. Carlyle. Don't say sorry, Eli. Mr. Carlyle moved closer and held out his hand. Hand over the suit. Eli's eyes widened in panic. I know I messed up, Mr. Carlyles. Please give me another chance. I can do better. Suit, his mentor insisted. Hand it over. Please, Eli begged. And the watch. Eli knew there was nothing he could do. Defeated, he handed over the metal case and took off the smartwatch. He handed over the watch and Mr. Carlyle put it on his desk. Mr. Carlyle opened a drawer and took out another smartwatch. It was bright silver. He tossed it to Eli, who caught it easily. He instructed. Put it on. Confused, Eli put on the smartwatch. Tell Rose to suit up, Mr. Carlyle added. Eli raised his wrist to his mouth and said to the watch, Rose, suit up. It happened immediately. The suit almost materialized out of thin air, crawling over him until it became solid. He looked down and the suit looked almost identical to his old one aside from the brighter colors. You like it? Mr. Carlyles looked smug. It's nanotech. I figured you needed an easier way to suit up and avoid people from finding your suit. It's amazing. Unsure, Eli asked. You're not angry with me? How many times do I have to tell you to relax? As long as your friend and sister don't tell anyone who you are, you're fine. But I was careless. They wouldn't have found out if I hadn't been so stupid. And that's how you learn. You do something stupid and you try not to do it again. Mr. Carlyle gave him a look. Don't do it again. The more people know, the higher chance of it getting out. You hear me? Eli was too relieved to do anything else but agree with. Chapter 28 Cohesion. Tadashi was back. Eli was greeted with a whole conspiracy wall on his friend's side of the room. There were photos and newspaper articles connected together with red yarn. Tadashi loved conspiracy theories, but this might be taking it too far. Ellie. Tadashi taped a photo of Lily Choi on the wall. Did you enjoy the holiday? He ignored that and waved towards the example of his friend's deteriorating sanity. What is this? I got sick of my electronic conspiracy wall, and I wanted a physical one. I can see that, but why do you need one? Tadashi looked around as if there could be anyone around to listen in to their conversation. He moved closer to Eli and muttered, Echo's members are superheroes. What? Eli stared at him in disbelief. Why would you think that? Tadashi rambled on about HC Entertainment recruiting people with superpowers for their talent. Echo was their girl group designed to capitalize on the lucrative celebrity statues of superheroes. Why do they have to be singers and heroes at the same time? Eli Question. Album sales, Tadashi answered. Merchandising and advertisements. Capitalism had a hand in superheroes. Was nothing sacred in this world? Eli was not impressed. It makes no sense. It does make sense, Tadashi insisted and pointed to his conspiracy wall. Look at the evidence. All I see is someone with too much time on his hands. Someone that needs a hobby. Want to join the non-existent hiking club, Tadashi? Tadashi scowled at his sass. There's one way to prove me right. You're a superhero now with connections. You can find out about Echo. Why not? That's a serious invasion of privacy, Eli explained. I told you the importance of keeping identities a secret. It endangers them and all their loved ones. Tadashi was quiet as he took this in before suggesting, how about just Lily Choi? No. Eli turned away, having enough of this. Why was he even friends with this weirdo? Tadashi had no respect for boundaries. He was surprised Tadashi hadn't revealed his secret to the whole world. Tadashi followed. Come on, Eli. What are friends for? Emma was barely off the plane when Tadashi called her about getting tickets for the City Fair. Tadashi was getting the tickets and was asking if he needed to get one for her boyfriend. Finals week was coming closer, and only the City Fair was keeping the student population from drowning in despair. Part carnival and part music festival, popular and indie artists would come for a weekend and play for a cause. All proceeds of the fair went to different charities. I don't know if he would want to go, she said as she got into a lift. I didn't get the chance to ask him if we were going. He repeated. Are you not going if he doesn't feel like it? I don't know. This is City Fair, Emo. We only get this once a year, and guess who's playing on the second night? Echo was going to be playing that weekend, much to Tadashi's excitement. They would be the first Korean artist to perform at the fair, and they were causing a stir on campus. I'll talk to Blaze and see if he wants to go. If he says no, I will be very upset, Tadashi declared. And once I dislike someone, it's hard for me stop. You haven't even spent time with him yet. Exactly. City fair can be his chance to impress me into supporting your relationship. And skipping out on me isn't going to make me feel good things about him. She nearly rolled her eyes at how dramatic he was. Tadashi. Mona, he said. This is my favorite artist in the world. I would love to have this experience with my friends, so please bat your doe eyes at your boyfriend and make this happen. I'll see what I can do. She was already planning on going regardless of what Blaze's plans were, but she wasn't telling Tadashi that. She arrived at campus and went to her dorm to unpack. She found Blaze sitting on her bed. Jenny was sitting by her desk. She could feel the tension between them. Hi guys, she greeted. How was your holiday? Jenny looked annoyed and pointed at Blaze's direction. He won't leave. Make him. I wasn't leaving till I saw you, Blaze said as he went to her. He dipped down and kissed her. Hello. Did you miss me? She smiled. Why? Did you miss me? Desperately, but don't tell anyone that. I have to keep my street cred. Jenny made a disgusted noise and got up, taking her messenger bag with her. She moved around them and went out of the door. Bye Jenny, Blaze called out cheerily. Don't rush back.
Blatze, Montag cheidet.
Be nice. She's not nice to me. Jenny wasn't nice to a lot of people. It was just how she was. She did not give any explanations and had no need to be understood. Mo wished she could have Jenny's blasé attitude towards people. It would save her a lot of anxiety. Jenny can be a little aloof, but deep down she's a big softie. And Jenny hid it like a weakness. Deep down, Blaze added. Like down to the center of the earth. She's not that bad. Wanting to change the subject, Mo said. My friends and I are going to this affair. Do you want to go with us? Both nights, he asked. I have something I have to do on the second night. Echo's performing on the second night and it's a big deal to Tadashi, she explained. He looked conflicted before he nodded. I'll be late but I can make it. What are you doing that night? Just something with my dad. He pulled her closer and kissed the corner of her mouth. But enough about him, I'm not done missing you. She kissed him. There were perks to being parted from your boyfriend. Absence did make the heart grow fonder. Chapter 29 Gravity. That weekend, Eli landed on the rooftop that overlooked the docks. Valiant was there and watching the security guards with night vision binoculars. Rose scanned over the perimeter and told him how many people were inside the factory. Eli checked for the time and concluded had time before the affair. Hi John. I mean Valiant, he said. What's the plan? Chromium wants us to wait for trucks delivering more of that metal you took photos of. Anything weird about the metal? It's some kind of rare alloy. Whatever it is, it has Chromium worried about the villains having it. What do you think they're going to do with it? Build a new base? Valiant supplied. Or an evil giant robot? The VA headquarters was actually nicely furbished. Eli used to do his homework in the lounge or at Catherine's desk. They had a fully stocked pantry with different cereals, which had been Eli's favorite food as a child. Valiant wouldn't know about any of that. Bad guys can't have weird metal. I think I got it, Eli said. There. Valiant pointed to the trucks driving up to the factory. We'll have to sneak in. Hello boys, a female voice called out. They turned to find a woman wearing black leather on the rooftop with them. She was wearing a pair of cat ears. You again, Valiant hissed. Me again. Copycat smiled mockingly. Did you miss me, Boy Scout? Like a tick. Ah, you're going to hurt my feelings. What do you want, Copycat? Can't I just want to see my favorite superhero? She cocked an eyebrow at Eli. And Tin Man Jr.? You shouldn't get involved in this, Eli declared. This has nothing to do with you. He couldn't fight with his sister. He knew this might happen. She had even warned him and he had hoped it never happened. He couldn't bear to hurt her. This has nothing to do with you either, she replied. Maybe you should leave before somebody gets hurt. Valiant cut in. Is that a threat? It can be if you want. Copycat smiled wider. You know I aim to please. Was she flirting with Valiant? Eli grimaced in disgust. Glad his face was covered. His sister flirting with anyone was gross in any situation. Thankfully Valiant wasn't flirting back with her. Get out of our way, Valiant warned. We don't want to fight with you. But what if I want to fight with you? She threw an electric blast at him that made him hunch over in pain. She waved goodbye before turning away and running off. Valiant followed her, jumping to the rooftop of the other building. Eli had to choose between the factory they were supposed to be watching and Valiant trying to murder his sister. The things he did for love. He sighed before flying after them. They were fighting, throwing kicks and punches at each other. Copycat avoided Valiant's hits easily. She threw a punch at his gut that made him grunt. As Eli watched them, he realized that Catherine was holding back. He knew she could move faster and hit harder than that. She collected super strength and super speed early on and could easily best Valiant even with all his combat training. Not to mention the other powers in her collection she could use to overpower Valiant. She was playing with Valiant, like a cat did with its food. Eli was about to put a stop to his sister's fun when a fireball hit him in the face. He shook off the flames, his suit deflecting the heat. Sunspark threw a large gust of flame at him from where he was standing on the alleyway. Eli dodged the flames, flying out of the way. Sunspark was making a run for it. Eli followed, dodging the fireballs the villain was throwing over his shoulder. Eli sped up until he could land in front of him and blocked his path. "Hey there, Sunburn," he said. "Missed me?" "Not really," Sunspark replied. "You're not my type." Sunspark pulled out a small metallic box from his jacket. He pressed a button on it and Eli was pulled to the ground until he was lying on his front. He couldn't move. It felt as if the Earth's gravity was pulling at him. Sunspark crouched down and showed off the metallic box. "You like it? It's the doc's new invention." Eli gritted his teeth, unable to even lift his head. "Let me up." "And why would I do that?" Fire appeared in his hands. "It's nothing personal, Wild. It's just business." "Screw you." Sunspark's mocking smile widened and Eli prepared himself for the burst of fire that was coming his way when a large shadow appeared over them. A large tidal wave was rising from the dock. Sunspark dropped the metallic box and ran. Eli's eyes widened in horror as he realized he was going to drown. The tidal wave receded back into the sea. Black boots appeared in his vision. A heeled boot stomped on the metallic box, crushing it. The gravitational force disappeared and Eli could move again. "Are you all right?" Catherine asked. Eli nodded as he got to his feet. "Thanks for saving me. What would you have done without me?" Catherine frowned. "You were this close to death." "I would have figured it out, or Valiant would have helped me." She scoffed. "Boy Scout can't even help himself. I knocked him out." "Is he okay?" "He'll be awake in a few minutes. He always gets up." She towed the crushed remains of Dr. Downfall's new invention. "Are you sure this is the life you want? Constant danger and people always trying to harm you. You can't say it's not exciting." "I'm being serious, Eli." Her brown eyes were filled with concern. "I worry about you all the time. I'm scared that you'll get in a fight you can't win and I won't be there to save you." He pulled back on the metallic mask to show his face. "I'm sorry for worrying you, but you have to let me do this on my own." "I know. I just wish you wanted to be something else." He didn't know what to say, so instead he told her. "Thanks again for getting rid of Sunspark." She shrugged. "I don't really care for Smokeburn's kid anyway. At least he wasn't the only one." She waved goodbye and turned to leave. "I love you," he called out. "I love you too." Chapter 30. Equilibrium. Eli flew to the rooftop where Valiant was unconscious. Eli tried to shake the man awake, but whatever Catherine did to him kept him down for a good few minutes. The trucks had left the factory and Eli didn't really know if he should leave Valiant and continue the mission or wait for him to wake up. He decided to call Chromium. "What's up, kid? We got attacked by Copycat and Valiant is out of commission." Chromium's deep laugh echoed. "She got him again? Should I bring him to the tower? Is he bleeding?" Eli looked over him just in case and there was no blood. There might be a few bruises.
No bleeding.
"She didn't stab him this time, so that's good." "Does she stab him a lot?" "Sort of," Chromium answered. "You'd think John would learn to dodge better." Valiant had told Eli over the summer about the supervillains in the city, and had alluded about which ones were the more troublesome. Eli had been riddled with too much anxiety and fear that they would find out he was related to Copycat, and he hadn't asked too many questions about her. He hadn't known his sister regularly stabbed Valiant. What did John ever do to her? "Should I continue breaking into the factory?" Eli asked. "I don't want you going in alone. This is too high risk," Chromium replied. "Wait for me. I'm coming over there. Somebody will pick up John and take him to the HL Tower." "Who?" "Savior." Eli tried to hide his excitement and nervousness. Savior was the whole reason he had wanted to become a superhero in the first place, and now he would get to meet him. He hadn't had the opportunity to meet the older superhero before since Savior was usually busy saving the world. Being able to fly and have super speed made it easy for Savior to assist people all over the world. Savior flew down to the rooftop, his red cape billowing in the wind. He was tall and broad-shouldered. He was easily intimidating if not for the friendly smile on his face. He said, "You must be Electric." "I am." His voice broke and he cleared his throat. "It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Savior, sir. You can just call me Savior." "Got it." He needed to stop talking. For once in his life he needed to be cool. Savior leaned down and picked up Valiant as if was as light as a pillow. Valiant wasn't a slight man. He was tall and muscled, but it was not a problem for Savior's superior strength. The older man nodded to Eli before flying off. Eli watched, awed and in disbelief that he just met his favorite superhero. It felt like he was in a very realistic dream. He checked for the time and realized how much time had passed. He hoped Chromium arrived soon and they could get this factory business over with. He didn't have all night. He needed to get to the CIT fair. Eli arrived at the CIT campus. His suit retreated and he was back to his civilian clothes. The nanotechnology was the best upgrade for how convenient it was. He took out the ticket Tadashi had given him earlier that day from his pocket, and he was let into the fair. He and Chromium had been able to get into the factory at the docks. He mostly had stood guard as Chromium looked around for files and inspected the shipments of rare alloy. It had taken over an hour to complete the mission and for Eli to fly back to campus. He had several missed calls from Tadashi and a few from Mo. He ran past the carnival rides and booths, followed the crowd of people gathered around the stage, and he could hear Echo performing from afar. They were singing and dancing to a choreographed routine. He pushed through the crowd trying to catch sight of his friends. Tadashi would have insisted on being as close to the stage as possible. He ignored the glares he was receiving and continued to move through the crowd, getting closer and closer to the stage. He could see Lily Choi on stage. Her hands almost looked like they were glowing on stage because of the lighting. He found Tadashi and nearly sighed in relief. "Hey," he said. "Sorry I'm late." Tadashi grinned and wrapped an arm around his shoulders. "I'm too happy at the moment to even be upset. Where's Mo? She and Blaze were here a moment ago." Eli had to speak louder because of the music. "Blaze is here. He arrived like an hour ago." Blaze would have come straight from the docks. He was still angry and didn't think he could stop himself from punching Blaze if he saw him. If Catherine hadn't been there, Eli didn't know what would have happened. He knew it would have been nothing good for him. Tadashi was wrapped up in Echo's performance as Eli tried to look through the crowd for any sign of Blaze and Mo. He found them at the edge of the crowd, surrounded by the paper lanterns that were meant to be released at the end of the concert. Eli saw Blaze's smug face and his anger was a charge that flowed through him, urging him forward. He didn't care about witnesses and secret identities. Eli was so sick of feeling powerless. Blaze had beaten him time and time again, and Eli had let him. He could feel his power in his hands, bright and warm like it was alive. The clouds above rumbled angrily, lightning flashing briefly. Blaze said something that made Mo smile. She looked up at him almost shyly before he dipped down and kissed her. The sight made Eli want to shout in anger. His powers felt like they would explode and destroy everything around him. He had felt this before when his powers started manifesting. He caused a blackout in downtown New Welch. Since then Catherine had taught him about control. His powers were for him to wield, and it was his responsibility to keep them in check. He could do more harm than good if he let himself. He could be the lightning strike to burn down a forest to take away electricity for a whole city. He closed his eyes and breathed in and out. He was in control, not the energy that lived inside of him. He opened his eyes as it began to rain. Blaze and Mo left, trying to escape the deluge. He watched them leave hand in hand and realized he couldn't make them break up. He couldn't make Mo love him back. Blaze had won that battle easily, before Eli even knew there was a war. He closed his eyes and thunder grumbled above him, commiserating. Chapter 31 Beam. A person had a 1 in 15,300 chance of getting hit by lightning in their lifetime, and a person had a 1 in 138,849 chance of dying from getting hit by lightning. Tadashi could count himself as either incredibly lucky or unlucky. He would have died if it wasn't for his favorite superhero coming to his rescue. After the concert ended, he tried to run from the field as everyone looked for shelter from the torrential rain. The thunder was loud enough that it made his heart beat faster in fear. He felt the charge before it hit him. When he was 3, he stabbed an electrical socket with a fork and lightning was that times 100. He blacked out. He gasped awake later, A woman wearing a pink domino mask hovering over him. His whole body hurt. His lungs ached as he tried to breathe. Are you okay? She asked. He tried to make out her face despite the darkness. People had left the fair. The remaining lights from the distant rides was their only illumination. He might not have recognized her if not for the weeks he spent researching about her. He scoured the internet about any information about her identity. Hyperbeam. Are you okay? She repeated. I think so. He tried to sit up. What happened? You were hit by lightning. What? He looked over at himself and he could still feel the remnants of it, the static clinging to his clothes. How am I still alive? She showed an empty palm-sized bottle. You were dying, and I couldn't find another way to save you. What was in the bottle? I am sorry, she continued. If you survive, your life will never be the same. What are you talking about? His nose began bleeding. He wiped at it quickly. Seeing the blood on his fingers made him woozy. His vision swam and he blacked out again. The next time he woke up, he was in a hospital room. His parents had flown in from San Luis and were very concerned about him almost dying. The doctors kept him in the hospital to monitor his recovery. He was miraculously healthy and didn't have any scarring or burst blood vessels. Eli visited him regularly, bringing his laptop so they could binge Netflix and prevent Tadashi from going insane. Mo visited him but Eli always disappeared when she was there. Are things okay with you and Mo? He asked. Of course, Eli answered. Why would anything be wrong? Tadashi didn't believe that for a second, but he was letting it slide. He had more important things he needed to discuss. I need to tell you something. About. That night I got hit by lightning, there was somebody there. I think she saved me. Who? And how did she save you? Tadashi hit pause on the screen, not wanting it as a distraction. He looked Eli in the eye as he said, it was Hyperbeam.
Elias Eyebrovs Furoved.
The Korean superhero? I told you about Echo. Lily Choi is Hyperbeam. It makes sense. You're still on about your conspiracy theory? The one night Lily is on campus and I meet Hyperbeam. That's not a coincidence.
Eli Sayed.
Say you're right and Lily is Hyperbeam. How did she save you from the lightning? She gave me something in a bottle. She didn't say what it was, only that my life would never be the same. Sounds ominous. It figures that when I finally get to meet my favorite superhero, I almost die. Eli stared at him in disbelief. Why is she your favorite superhero? I'm your best friend. And you didn't invite me to Pumpkin Fest last year. Tadashi gave him a look. I'm still upset about it. Tadashi was released from the hospital the next day and just in time for finals. It was stressful but he managed through it. He couldn't get his mind off of what Hyperbeam might have given him that night of the CIT fair. He had no way of contacting her to find out. He retreated to what he knew. He looked up more conspiracy theories about Echo and superheroes. He tried to research about chemicals that could prevent somebody from dying and healed injuries. He wasn't making much progress till he met somebody online who made claims about shady practices of HC Entertainment. He was taping photos and articles to his gradually cluttered conspiracy wall when Eli came in. His roommate grimaced and stared at the grainy black and white photos. What's a serum baby? Eli asked. It's a baby that got their superpowers from a serum. At Eli's visible skepticism, Tadashi added, you were born with your powers, right? They develop during puberty and that's how it is for most supers. They get their powers and they either become good or bad. Eli nodded and Tadashi continued. There's been research that those powers are genetic. There's a gene, the super gene, and that's what makes you different from any normal human being around you. He told his roommate about the Nazis discovering the gene during the war and their experiments to modify and replicate the gene. The research was abandoned at the end of the war, only to be rediscovered by the Soviets later on. And they succeeded in replicating the gene, creating a serum. If they succeeded, shouldn't everyone have powers?
Eli Kvestsen.
The serum didn't work on everyone, and they learned that it worked best when given to infants. It was too unstable on adults. Tadashi hadn't printed the grotesque photos he found of experiments gone wrong. And noticed how we had a boom of supers in the 70s and 80s? Some of them had to have been serum babies. Why would people do that to babies? What would be the point? Everyone wants to be a super Eli. Being able to fly or move things with your mind would be amazing. Tadashi explained. People would kill to have what you have. People die trying to get it. Eli swallowed, staring warily at the conspiracy wall. Even if all this was true, why are you researching it? I think what Hyperbeam gave me that night was the serum. His eyes widened. She gave you a serum that gives people powers? To save my life. But you said the serum was unstable when given to adults, Eli remarked. What's going to happen to you? Tadashi had considered this, and all his research pointed to excruciating pain and death. Worst case scenario, I grow an extra head or my bones could melt into soup, he said. Best case scenario, I become like you. Like me. A hero. Eli swallowed and he rubbed the back of his neck. What if nothing happens and you just stay the same? I don't want you to expect so much only to be disappointed. The alternative could be death. And if given the chance, I would prefer not dying, Tadashi replied. I have too much to live for. Is there a time frame for when you can find out? I have no idea. It wasn't just the temptation of becoming extraordinary that was at stake here. The scariest part would be the waiting, whether he was going to wake up with cool powers one day or die. He really didn't want to die. Chapter 32. Adaptation. Finals were over and everyone was about to leave campus for winter break. After Tadashi's near-death experience, Emo wanted to cheer him up. Tadashi just seemed more anxious and distracted lately. She couldn't imagine what it was like to get hit by lightning, but she was trying her best to be understanding. Almost losing someone tended to put things into perspective. Emo caught up with him after their last exam and suggested they go out since it was their last night before they went home for the holidays. Hell yes. Tadashi fist bumped her. Karaoke it is. She smiled conspiringly. Eli's going to hate it. Tadashi returned her smile. Get enough beer in him and he will forget how much he hates it. It had worked the last time they went to karaoke. Beer and Eli was a fun combination. He sang with them until they almost lost their voices. Drunk Eli was confident, funny, and could eat his weight in onion rings. Tadashi checked his watch for the time. It's still kind of early. Let's leave at 6. 6 is fine. You may have to drag Eli by force. I'll knock him out and stuff him in a suitcase if I have to. He will be there, he replied. Are you inviting your boyfriend? I'll see if Blaze is free. I might even trick Jenny into coming. I'm still sad I didn't get to watch her destroy you all at golf. It was a massacre. Emo had been surprised the golf game didn't end with somebody dying. See you at 6. Blaze had to leave campus early because his dad wanted him back home. He had only been able to tell her goodbye before he was getting in his car and driving away to get to Locke's Chase. Emo had been bereft but understood. She went and asked Jenny if she wanted to go, fully expecting to be rejected, only to be surprised when her roommate agreed to come with them. What? Emo asked. You're going. Jenny gave her a dry look. You asked and I said yes. You usually say no. I felt like a change, the blonde replied. Do you not want me to go?
Ido.
I was just a little surprised.
Montagsmilet Brechtli.
This is so exciting. We're going to have a lot of fun. When Eli gets drunk, he dances like a reanimated zombie that's being electrocuted.
Eli Sayed.
Do I have to go? Yes you do, Tadashi answered. This isn't just karaoke night. This is a Tadashi almost died and we're ecstatic we still have him with us celebration. Unless you're unhappy I survived getting beef slapped by a thundercloud. Of course I'm happy you're okay. Tadashi cut him off. Do you know how rare it is to actually get hit by lightning? Very rare. I looked up the statistics. I'm a unicorn. The lightning certainly didn't fry Tadashi's flair for dramatics. I'm relieved you're alive, Tadashi, Eli insisted patiently. I couldn't imagine my life without you in it. You should be. I would miss me too. Tadashi wrapped an arm around his shoulders. And there's Emo and Jenny now. Jenny's coming? She's our ride. And we need a designated driver. Remember last time? The last time they went to karaoke was for last semester's finals. They missed the last train back to campus. Eli had to remember where Catherine's apartment was despite the fact he could barely see straight. His sister had not been happy being woken up at 2 in the morning by 3 drunken teenagers. He should have called beforehand but his phone's battery died, and he couldn't remember Catherine's phone number. Emo got to sleep in his old room while Tadashi and Eli collapsed on the living room couch. Catherine shoveled food and coffee down their throats in the morning and drove them to campus. Catherine made sure they all knew her phone number by heart by the time they got out of her car. Jenny stopped before them and declared, If any of you puke in my car, you will mysteriously go missing. I have a plan and an alibi. Eli and Tadashi raised their hands in surrender. Jenny got into the driver's seat and they shuffled into her car. Emo was in the passenger seat and directed Jenny to the karaoke bar in downtown New Welch. It was near the Korean barbecue restaurant they went to the last time they hung out. The karaoke room was small with black leather couches, neon lights and a large flat-screen TV. Eli eyed the bucket of beer bottles warily. Tadashi opened a few and handed them one each except for Jenny. Eli drank the beer reluctantly. Emo turned on the TV and was looking through the songbook with Tadashi. "We have to start off with a party song," Tadashi said, getting up to select song on the TV. "And what's a better song than Miley's Party in the USA?" The guitar riff blasted through the speakers. Tadashi sang the opening lyrics and Emo joined in. They waved Eli over to join and he resisted. The chorus came and he gave in, swaying and singing off-key with his friends. Jenny chewed on onion rings and watched them, uninterested in participating. 2 more beers and Eli felt a lot more relaxed. He sang Taylor Swift's 22 with his friends, uncaring how he sounded. Who cared if his voice broke because he couldn't reach the high notes? Karaoke wasn't about talent. He even tried to sing along with Tadashi to K-pop songs, even though he didn't know any Korean. That wasn't stopping him from trying to sing Blackpink's As If It's Your Last. He banged his head and danced through the chorus, making Emo and Tadashi burst into hysterical laughter. Eli grabbed another beer and encouraged them to drink with him. "Don't be weak, SHT. I forgot how blunt drunk Eli is," Tadashi remarked. "And hungry," Emo added. Eli took the whole platter of onion rings and tried to shovel 3 at a time into his mouth. Jenny stared at him in disgust. "Chew. You're going to choke." Eli took a large swallow of beer and told her, "Bite me." Jenny looked too shocked to respond. Drunk Eli was less polite. Emo tried to get him to drink some water. He refused and grabbed the remote to choose a song. Queen's Somebody to Love began playing. He snatched the microphone from Tadashi. He belted through the song. After what felt like weeks of constantly being afraid, angry and helpless, he sang out all his emotions through the song. He looked at Emo as he sang the chorus, wishing he could tell her how he felt and that it would matter. He could sing this to her directly and it wouldn't change how she felt about him. As he sang the last line, he put down the microphone. The song continued and he offered his hand to Emo. He pulled her to her feet and led her in a slow dance. His hands on her waist, she rested her head on his shoulder as they swayed. He could have this moment. He could pretend he ever had a chance and she could have loved him too. He would move on after this. He could find somebody to love, somebody that wasn't. Chapter 33 Information. Emo woke up with a hangover, which wasn't a pleasant way to start the day. But what was a girl to do? She had an early morning flight and had gladly sacrificed sleep to spend the night with her friends. They had a great time at the karaoke bar until finally calling it a night. Eli ended up puking out on the street before they got into Jenny's car. Jenny had acted the part of an overworked parent and dragged them to their dorms. She woke Emo after 2 hours of sleep, gave her water and painkillers for the hungover, and drove Emo to the airport. "Thanks for everything, Jen," Emo said. "I hope you weren't too annoyed with us last night." "It was fascinating in a way, like watching National Geographic." Emo laughed despite her aching head and put on her sunglasses, to avoid the glare of the fluorescent lights. "Happy holidays, Jenny. I'll see you next semester." "Happy holidays, Emo." Jenny paused before adding, "And you don't need to rush back here. Spend Christmas with your family. Boys can wait." "What?" "I mean that if your boyfriend decides he wants to steal you away from your family for a visit, tell him no. It's too soon and he's not worth it anyway." Emo was too hangover and tired for this. She couldn't think straight. "Why don't you like Blaze, Jenny?" "He hasn't done anything to you." "Not to me." "What does that even mean?" "You're going to be late for boarding," Jenny told her. "Never mind what I said. I'm just cranky from having almost no sleep." Emo tucked her hair behind her eyes, having no energy for this.
Yen. Bei Montag.
Jenny walked away without glancing back. Emo went to get on her plane. She could sleep on the flight to Sanmei. Sleep deprivation did weird things to people. Being a super had its perks. Eli had never been sick in his life and that included hangovers. He could get drunk but it only lasted for a few hours. Aside from being sleepy from a late night out, he was fine. Tadashi swore at him as his roommate had to drag himself from bed to get ready for this flight at noon. He took the train from Say to New Welch and made his way downtown. Catherine would be at work and he left his stuff at the apartment. It was lunchtime and he messaged her about getting some food together. Her reply was unsurprisingly delayed. He made his way to the cafe bookstore nearby. He greeted the staff who had known him since he was a kid and let him into the back room. Opening the closet door that was a cover for the elevator, he pressed the down button. The elevator opened to the reception area for the VA headquarters. He smiled at the receptionist, a pretty middle-aged lady with red hair. Mel. Is Kat in? Ailey. Mel smiled back. You get taller every time I see you. Catherine's on a mission and will be back in an hour. You can wait in her office if you want. Maybe I'll just raid the pantry for snacks. Do we still have those cheese pretzels? Those are for employees. I'm a starving college kid. I would say I need them more. Mel smiled. She used to help him with his homework and was never that strict with him no matter what the VA policies were. She conceded. Stay away from the cereal. You lost those privileges when you turned 18. That's cold, Mel. We haven't even restocked the milk. There's a cafe upstairs. The milk there is for paying customers. He grasped his chest as if he was in pain. You used to love me, Melrose. You used to be adorable. She went back to her computer. If you will excuse me, I have to get back to work. He sighed in faux despondency and left Mel. He would eat the cereal dry out of spite. That would show her. And it would fill the time before Catherine came back from wherever she was. He collided with somebody carrying a large pile of folders, obscuring their vision. The folders went flying, papers falling to the carpeted floor. A girl with purple hair sighed in dismay as she knelt down to start collecting the documents. He went to help her immediately. Sorry, the girl said frantically. I'm new. It's fine, he tried to reassure. Are you interning here? Yes. It's my first week and I already managed to mess up. It's just files. I'm surprised they haven't switched everything to digital. That's what I was going to do. I was supposed to encode and scan these. She got to her feet. He was carrying half the files. Thanks for your help, but I have to get to it. I can help carry these for you. Not being able to see can cause more accidents. That's true, she said. She looked unsure. I'm going to the records room. I would hate to be a bother. You don't have to help me with this. I was headed to the pantry anyway, which I know is near the records room. Her eyebrow furrowed. If you're sure. I am. He smiled. I'm Eli, by the way. I'm Jisoo. They walked towards the records room and he asked, You don't have to answer, but are you a super? She nodded. I'm a shapeshifter. That's cool. Into a guinea pig. What? I can only shapeshift into a guinea pig, she explained. I know it's lame and not at all useful. It's why I'm probably never going to be a real supervillain like Copycat. There weren't a lot of villains like Catherine. She could replicate anyone's powers and collected them. She could do everything her opponents and allies did. Comparing yourself to her wasn't fair at all. Believe me, Copycat isn't as scary as you think, he remarked. She slept with a nightlight until she was 13. Jisoo bit back a laugh. How would you know that? She's my older sister. At her wide eyes he added. And that nightlight story is completely true. Wow. You are so lucky. I know. He glanced down and saw a familiar name on one of the files peeking out of the top envelope. They stopped outside the records room and Eli said, If you need anything more embarrassing stories, what cereal is best to eat in the pantry, don't hesitate to talk to me. Jisoo smiled. Thanks, Eli. I'll keep that in mind. She turned to go inside the records room. In that short moment she had her back to him. He slid the top folder of the pile he was carrying underneath his coat. He handed over the pile to Jisoo and she smiled gratefully. He left quickly and headed for the men's bathroom. He went to a stall and locked it behind him. He pulled out the folder from his coat and opened it to read the document. His name was on the document, and it listed all of his information from his birthday to his blood type. And there in the section about his parents it said his father's name, Robert Hughes. He knew that name. It was Xavier's real name. Chapter 34 Research. Could be a coincidence. Robert Hughes was a common name, but the more Eli read through his life, the more he was sure of his relation to Xavier. The document detailed Eli's powers manifesting and developing through the years. And there was even a note that his powers differed from his father's. His thoughts were spinning. Catherine had to have known this whole time about their father. She was 8 when their dad left them. She had to have had memories or their mom could have said something when she was alive. He needed to talk to someone. He left the bathroom, folder in hand, and went back to Sue's desk. Hey Mel, he said. Is Aunt Marie in? She is, but she's busy. You can't go in. Great. He headed for the door leading into Marie's office and let himself in. Thanks, Mel. Ailey. He closed the door behind him, zapping its doorknob to discourage anyone from opening it. Marie was sitting at her desk, reading over something on her tablet. She was a tall middle-aged woman with long curly hair. She wasn't his real aunt, but she had been there for them after Catherine had joined the VA. She was like family and his aunt in every way but one. He took a seat on the chair across from him.
Hello, Ellie.
Marie smiled genially. I missed you at Thanksgiving. He went to her and dropped the document on top of her tablet for her to see. Aunt Marie. He wasn't in the mood for niceties. His thoughts were threatening to overspill like yolk from a cracked egg. He could barely sit still in that chair. She put the document to the side. How'd you get your hands on that? It doesn't matter, he replied. Did you know about Xavier? What about him? Please don't play coy with me. Did you know he was my father? Of course I did. Her reply was blunt. We do background checks on anyone that joins the VA. We were wary to let Catherine in because of the connection to such a well-known hero, but I decided to take a chance on her. He shook his head. You've known me for nearly 10 years, and you didn't say a word. It wasn't my information to share. Catherine was your guardian, and she chose not to tell you about this. Catherine had discouraged Eli from asking about their father, citing how he had abandoned Eli when he was only a week old. How their mother struggled to raise them on her own without any support. How Catherine had to be both of Eli's parents to him when their mom died. Their father was a selfish deadbeat not worth getting to know. But he wasn't. He was a superhero. He was Eli's favorite superhero. The very reason Eli wanted to become a hero himself. Eli grew up idolizing his own father without even knowing it. All my life I wondered who my father was, what he was like, he said. And to find out he's f***ing Savior. This is insane. What is such a surprise, Eli? Marie returned. The first powers Catherine mimicked was your father's. You had to have some idea. I thought she met him or another superhero with the same abilities. Even when she was a child? He remembered Catherine flying to reach places she would have needed ladders for. She could carry heavy things without help. She would use heat vision to warm up food instead using the microwave. She never got injured or sick. All the signs were there and he had failed to notice. He left us. The truth was heavy like cement in his belly. Why did he do that? Marie's eyes were soft as she told him. You will need to ask your sister. He left Marie's office, dodging Sue's angry complaints. Catherine's office was on the same floor, and he found her there. She was still in her leather outfit. She took off the cat ears and the black domino mask and put them on her desk. Eli, she greeted. Did you just get here? He closed the door behind him. I know about Dad. She stilled. What? I know about Xavier and how you kept that information from me, he continued. You knew all this time and you didn't say a word. I've met him, and I had no idea who he was to me. He isn't anything to you. He abandoned us. I know that. He tried to swallow the frustrating that was quickly becoming anger. I need to know why he left. He didn't want us anymore. He wanted to be a hero more than being a husband and father, Catherine explained bitterly. Outside of the cape and tights, he's not so wonderful. He was gone for over 10 years, then he just expected to be welcomed back with open arms. His eyes widened. 10 years? He tried to contact us after Mom died. Catherine crossed her arms over her chest. I turned him away. I told him we didn't need him, and I didn't want him anywhere near you. He sighed deeply. I know he hurt you, but you took away my chance to even know him. I don't have any memories of him, Catherine. Not like you do. All I have is me watching Xavier on TV, and wishing I could be like him someday. He would have disappointed you. That's what he does, she insisted. I was protecting you. You keep trying to control every aspect of my life. I am 19. I'm not a kid anymore, he retorted. And you're not my mom. Catherine stiffened. Her brown eyes were wide in shock. She had always been so careful to hide when she was hurt. He could see it plainly on her face, in the way she clutched at her ribs like she was afraid she would start bleeding through. He swallowed. I'm sorry, but I can't be around you right now. Where are you going to go? I'm going to be okay. Don't worry, he said. I'm staying with a friend. Are you going to talk to Xavier? He didn't answer. She shook her head. That's a mistake, Eli. It's mine to make. He turned to leave. Bye, Chapter 35. Patent. Eli didn't really have a place to stay. He went to Catherine's apartment to get his things and tried to think of where he would go from there. The dorms would be closed for the holidays, and none of his friends lived in the city. He had a few friends from high school, but none he was close enough with to be able to stay with them for all of winter break. He could probably stay with Alex, but Catherine would know to go there first. He went to his bedroom and tried to come up with a plan. He didn't have money for a hotel. He couldn't even stay still. He paced, his thoughts rushing through him. He tried to remember the coping techniques his doctor told him when he was first diagnosed with ADHD. Medication could only do so much. He had to be in control of his own damn mind. He reached for his phone and dialed a number. He waited as it rang a few times until there was an answer. Hello. Mo. The sound of her voice felt like a balm on a wound. What's going on? He took a seat on his bed. He wished she was there with him and he could take her hand in his. She made him feel centered. She was calm in a sea of chaos around him. Ellie. She sounded concerned. I've had a really bad day, he told her. Worse than usual. Do you want to talk about it? He told her a version of the truth without the superheroes and villains. He explained about how his father left when he was a baby, and he never really knew him. His father tried to reach out to him and Catherine after their mom died. And Catherine refused to let him be part of Eli's life. Eli had found out about it recently from a family friend, and he fought with Catherine about her need to control him. I'm sorry this is happening, Eli, she said. Are you going to reach out to your dad? I don't know. Maybe not right now, but do you want to get to know him in the future? It was complicated. He understood Catherine's pain, witnessed the hardships their mom went through as a single mother. Not every story they told him about his dad had been bad. He had been a good father before he left, and that's why Catherine could hate him. I'm not sure if he even wants to get to know me, he confessed. What if I show up on his doorstep and he turns me away? Then that would be his loss. He could almost hear her smile. And we know he already tried to reach out before. Wouldn't it be better to know than to wonder for the rest of your life what would have happened? The possibility of not being wanted not once but twice in his life sounded unbearable. This was a man that walked away from him before he could even walk. This was the same man that could fly anywhere in the world to save people. How was he supposed to consolidate these two different men into one? I'll talk to him soon, he said finally. He's a stranger. He can't hurt me. I'll be here whenever you need to talk, Mo reassured him. I wish I was there so I could give you a hug. I miss your hugs. He missed her whenever he wasn't with her. He had realized his feelings for her last summer when he felt this same longing. He had wanted to call her all the time and share every moment with her. He had wanted to tell her about his feelings in the right moment. I miss you, he said. His words weren't enough. I like you wasn't enough. They weren't as substantial as the other 3 words he was terrified to say. I miss you too, Eli. He tried to imagine her face as she said the words. Be safe. I'll try, he tried to joke. I can't make any promises. He had called Mr. Carlyle and explained that he needed a place to stay. His mentor had advised him to go to the HL Tower as there was plenty of room. He took the subway and stopped outside the building, staring at the many floors and shiny windows. It was one of the highest skyscrapers in the city. Eli would never forget the first time he entered the building and Mr. Carlyle offered him a place on the league. His dreams were being presented on a platter and Eli couldn't sign fast enough. He hadn't really thought back then what it would mean for the people in his life. Catherine's disapproval or putting his friends in danger didn't factor until later. Security let him in and he took the elevator. Valiant or John was there to greet him, dressed in his civilian clothes. Hi John, Eli said. Sorry for appearing last minute like this. Don't worry about it. You're part of the team and we have dozens of empty rooms. John led him to a room at the end of the hall. This one has one of the best views of the city. John was right. He could see Midtown and all the way to the harbor. He was able to get this view when he was flying around in his suit but not as a view in his bedroom. The current room was 4 times the size of his dorm room at CIT, and it even had its own bathroom which was a welcome change after 3 semesters having to share one with 30 other people. It's just a few of us on this floor, John explained. If you want to hang out, we're usually in the living room. We play video games to unwind. Aren't any of you coming home for the holidays? This is our home. Part of the job is being married to it. Eli didn't know what to feel about that. Does Savior live on this floor? The older heroes live on the floor above us. Is it okay if I go up there and try to talk to Savior? What about? It's personal. Eli rubbed the back of his neck. I can't really go into more detail than that. Thankfully, John didn't press the issue. I can check if he's in. He won't mind.
No.
Robert's a great guy. John smiled. And he's my mentor so he'll be more lenient on us for invading his private hours. John led them back to the elevator. Eli waited in the living room area on the floor, sitting on a stuffed chair as he waited for John to come back from talking to Xavier. John reappeared after a short but nerve-wracking moment and let him into Xavier's room before leaving. Xavier was in his civilian wear in a sweater and pants. He looked disarmingly normal out of his suit. "Electric, right?" the older superhero asked. "We met at the dock few weeks ago."
Ellie nodded.
His heart in his throat made it hard to speak. "That's me. What's going on? I need to tell you something." "Go on." He had to rip the band-aid off. There was no moving around this if he wanted to get this done. He took a deep breath before saying, "I'm your son." Chapter 36. Retrospective. Xavier stilled. "What?" Eli rubbed the back of his neck, his heart beating faster in nervousness.
"I'm Ellie.
"You and my mom used to be a thing." His parents were never married. It was why Eli didn't have his surname. Catherine had told him it was because their parents had been in their last year of college when they had her, and they never saw the point in marrying. Eli realized that maybe it had something to do with his father being a superhero. "You're Eli." "Yes." Eli stared at his father's face and could see the similarities between them. They looked so alike with the sharp angle of their jaws, the easy curve of their mouth, and even the dark curly hair. He was a leaner, younger mirror of his father except for his mother's brown eyes. Eli could see what he would look like in 30 years in the man in front of him. "Is it really you?" Xavier swallowed. "You're all grown up. How old are you?" "I turned 19 last summer. The 10th of August. I remember."
Xavier no. Robert smiled.
He stared at Eli in pleased surprise. "Look at you. I can't believe it. I'm sorry for just barging into your life, but I just wanted to meet you," Eli explained. "Catherine told me you tried to reach out after Mom passed away." Robert nodded. "I wanted to be there for you. Catherine wasn't open to reconciliation and I couldn't really blame her. I shouldn't have left." "Why did you leave?" "This job requires sacrifice. I couldn't be your dad and save the world at the same time. Ultimately, it was safer for all of you that I wasn't around." "That's not true. We could have made it work. Your mom and I tried for years but I was barely around. She was raising Cat alone and it wasn't fair to them," Robert replied. "When you were born, your mom issued an ultimatum. She made me choose between my family or being Xavier. I chose duty because the world needed me. We needed you too." "I know. I tried to reach out to your mom and support her but she's always been proud." Eli remembered how proud and stubborn his mother had been. She was this strong, unstoppable force that could do anything. Catherine had idolized her and inherited her strength and tenacity. He could see his mom refusing any support from Robert and refusing to forgive him, just like Catherine would do after her. She couldn't understand the cost of this life. "Not like we do," Robert said. "I'm still pretty new at the superhero thing so I don't understand actually." Robert swallowed. He seemed to be understanding of the rejection, even expecting it. "I see. But I would like to understand," Eli added. "It's not too late, right?" Robert smiled, his blue eyes relieved.
"No.
It's not too late." Eli never had any memories of him. He wanted to make some. He wanted to know the man, not the superhero he had admired. Growing up without a dad made him feel like a part of him had always been missing. Maybe now it could be fixed. Robert brought them to the Hall of the Fallen. Portraits of every hero on the League Pass were hung on the walls. It always felt somber to walk by portraits of dead superheroes. Most of them died during missions. Only a few of them lived long lives. They stopped at the large portrait of the old guard. All but one of them had died over the years. Commander Valor was in the middle, carrying his iconic shield. He had been hailed as the world's very first superhero. "Do you know where your name is from, Eli?" Robert asked. "After Grandpa Elias. Your mom's father. He was a good man," his father continued. "We thought Elias was too old-fashioned so we decided on Eli instead." Eli had heard the story from his mom when he was younger. He did know his maternal grandparents before they passed away when he was 6. He had vague memories of his grandmother's flowery perfume and his grandfather's gruff voice. They died the same year, only a few weeks apart. "Your middle name, Charles, is after your other grandfather," Robert added. His gaze focused on the portrait of the old guard. People knew him as Commander Valor. Eli's eyes widened. "What? I'm not the first in our family to have powers. My father came back from the war, changed in many ways. He became the world's first superhero." Eli stared at the portrait of the commander, and he was able to see the resemblance to Robert. "I don't know what to say. This is incredible. My mother was Florence James. She was an English nurse who my father fell in love with while he was over there. He married her and brought her here. Florence is Catherine's middle name. Robert nodded, smiling. She's where Catherine got her powers from. My mother could replicate other people's abilities for short periods of time. Superpowers were genetic. They would develop and change as they were passed on. That makes so much sense. Then he asked, how come I don't have your powers? Robert shrugged. It's not cut and dry. My father couldn't fly and I can.
Ellie Loghead.
Do we have any more interesting people in our family tree? Sea Lord was my godfather, and Astrea is a distant cousin. Robert put a hand on his shoulder, and led him to another portrait. It was of the Fearless Five, the group of superhero Savior had been a part of back in the 90s. He pointed to the man dressed in red and black, Crimson Dagger. Crimson Dagger was my best friend. Will was your godfather. Robert frowned. At least until he was killed by aliens. I thought Crimson Dagger is only lost in space. There was never confirmation he died. No one has seen him in over 18 years, so unless he shows up on Earth someday, he's considered legally dead. Eli didn't really want to delve into whether being lost on an alien planet constituted as being declared dead for all intents and purposes. Instead, he asked, what was Commander Valor like? He was a good hero. He set the standard for us to follow. I meant, what was he like as a person? He wasn't around much. He was always busy being the commander. Robert looked contemplative as he concluded, I suppose I got that from him. Chapter 37 Blue Shift. Emma stretched before she went on her morning jog. A run through her neighborhood was almost meditative. The sight of the familiar houses and streets was comforting. She knew all the residents and waved at a few of them she passed by. It didn't snow in Bay Valley even though it was the middle of December. The air was frigid enough that she had to wear a jacket, but it would never be as frigid as New Welch. On your left, a male voiced out. She didn't turn to look and focused on running. Morning, Uncle Felix. It's nice to know you still run, Nay, he said as he caught up to her. Especially as I'm not there to be your jogging buddy. I make do. Blaze was an early riser due to rowing and would often go on runs with her after practice. Eli would occasionally join her if Blaze wasn't around. Tadashi had refused to wake up before breakfast was served in the dining hall. Emo rarely had to jog by herself. Uncle Felix tapped her shoulder. Hey, slow down. We don't need to rush. Emo was about to ask why when she saw his ex-wife Susanna was leaving her house to take her dog on a walk. The aging golden retriever Chase wagged his tail excitedly when he saw them. Emo ran over to greet the dog, having known him since she was in grade school. She patted his furry face as he tried to lick her face.
Ai, Auntie Sue.
Emo wasn't sure if she could still address her as Auntie after the divorce, but it felt weird to call her just by her first name or by Miss Valentine. How have you been? I've been doing well, Nay. How's college?
I'm surviving.
I still have 3.5 years left. Architecture was a 5-year program. She still had a long way to go before graduation. Susanna smiled. Her hazel eyes narrowed when Uncle Felix cleared her throat to get his attention. Felix. Susanna, he replied. You look good. Did you get a haircut? I didn't, actually. She tugged lightly on Chase's leash to pull him away. If you would excuse me, I still have to walk, Chase. We could join you. We're running in that direction anyway.
No, no.
She waved him off. Don't bother. I wouldn't want to intrude.
Sue.
Goodbye, Nay. She gave Emo a smile before walking off.
Montag warfet aukwartli.
Bye. Uncle Felix sighed deeply before running off in the opposite direction. Emo followed him, easily able to catch up despite him using some of his super agility. He had trained her one summer in high school to help her get on the soccer team. The early morning runs had worked and learning self-defense was just practical. You know, I think you're annoying Susanna more by trying too hard, Emo pointed out. What happened to flowers and chocolate? I tried those and they didn't work. Sue was never one for presents. What does she like? I used to make her laugh. Now she glares at me. Maybe she needs space? I've given her all the space she wanted, he sighed. What she wants is for me to go to the moon and stay there. I say this with affection, but maybe giving up would be the best thing to do here? She doesn't seem to want to make up. You sound like your dad. He is known to be very sensible. Uncle Felix's lips quirked in an amused smile. You got that from him. I'm the fun twin. Of course. She added in a whisper. You're the one with superpowers. I was the fun one long before those developed. They turned to another block that led to the town center. There were cheery decorations all over town. Shops decorated in tinsel and Yule wreaths. Lanterns made of little chilies were hung on street lamps. Chilies were the town's biggest source of income aside from fishing. You want some ice cream? Uncle Felix asked. They went into the ice cream parlor. Like most children in Bay Valley, it had been Mo's favorite place in town when she was little. She ordered strawberry ice cream and Uncle Felix decided to take a chance on the new lobster flavor. She watched him eat in fascinated horror. It's not that bad, he said. I believe you. She didn't. He paused, staring at something behind her. She turned to see a mother and child. The little boy could have been of Latino or Filipino descent with the tan skin and dark hair. The child couldn't be older than 3. Susanna wanted kids, you know, Uncle Felix remarked, his voice laced with regret. I wanted to wait. I was too focused on my job. By the time we wanted to try, it was too late for us. Mo hadn't known that. He had been the cool uncle her whole life with the cool job and sneaked her candy behind her parents' back. He and Susanna were the likable couple who balanced each other out. They seemed perfect on the surface, and the divorce had been a shock for the whole family. It was only after the divorce that Mo and her family realized their relationship had been far from perfect. The disagreement on children must have been one of the many cracks that caused the marriage to fall apart. She waited for me. For years, he continued. It only seems fair that I wait for her now. What if she never wants you back? Then, I'll live the rest of my life alone. I kind of deserve it for ruining hers. You didn't ruin her life. I didn't make it better either. I think she was happy for most of it. I remember when I was a child and she didn't look miserable. She learned to be good at pretending. He looked away. Until she couldn't. Wanting to cheer him up, Mo reached across the table and patted his hand. If it's any consolation, I think you would have made a great dad. He smiled softly. You might be the closest I'll ever have to a daughter, so I'll take it.
Chapter 38. Universal.
Eli ran to the communal kitchen in the HL Tower, nearly colliding into the island as he slowed down. John threw an apron at him and Eli put it on quickly. After nearly a week living at the HL Tower, Eli had been getting to know the members of the league. Eli was the youngest person there, which did provide some initial awkwardness as he wasn't able to get pop culture references that were too old for him to know. Thankfully, John was there, and he always tried to include Eli in group of activities from impromptu basketball games to movie nights. They could order food, but they enjoyed cooking and put a lot of effort into it. It was Eli's first time to help with the cooking and he had no idea what to do. He never cooked a day in his life. Astria, or Stella, handed him a peeler and a bowl of potatoes. You can handle this, right?
Eli nodded.
Peeling seemed easy enough. She taught him how to cube the potatoes after. She and John were making some kind of soup. Where are you from, Eli? Stella asked. From here. Really? I grew up in Murdoch's kitchen. I'm from King's Village. She smiled. It's nice to have another native New Welcher on the team. John was stirring the soup pot with a wooden spoon and added, he's Savior's son. Her mouth dropped in surprise. No way. Eli could feel his face going red in embarrassment. The members of the league all had similar reactions once they found out he was related to Savior. It made him feel awkward since he didn't really do anything to earn any admiration. It makes sense now why you're a hero. Of course Savior's kid would grow up to be one, Stella remarked. It is a little bit weird to think of Savior having a family. I always considered him to be more godlike. He's above mortal experiences like changing diapers. I'm sure that's not true, John countered. Right, Eli? Eli hadn't told any of them the details of his relationship with Savior. It wasn't necessary for them to know, and he didn't want them to judge his father for what happened in the past. They couldn't do anything about what already happened. Both Eli and Robert were focusing on the now, and building their relationship from the ground up. He's just like any other guy when he's not in his suit, Eli said. This wasn't a lie. Eli and Robert had been getting to know each other, and aside from the superpowers, his dad was astonishingly normal. His dad liked sports and restoring classic cars. He co-owned a popular local brewery. Eli even got to name their new beer, which was Karaoke Thunder. Bobby and I are distant cousins. Third cousins twice removed or something, Stella remarked. That would make us family.
Eli smiled.
I guess so. Do you know how to deb one fish, cousin?
No.
I'll teach you then. She dropped a big salmon on the counter. The fish's eye was pointed straight at Eli. Don't look Nemo in the eye for this. Eli looked away from the fish's face. Stella handed him a knife. She promised to teach him how to cook before the winter break was over, whether he liked it or not. Christmas was stressful in the Ramirez household. Most grandparents had been hosting Noche Buena since before Emo was born. It became their tradition after migrating from the Philippines. Being in a new country wasn't easy and food was a great comfort. A part of home they could take with them. It took a full day of extensive cooking, not including prepping the ingredients. Emo missed being a child and just being able to play until dinner time. She was exhausted after a day of chopping, dicing, and nearly burning herself with the saucepan. The results were worth it. They had a full spread of beef calderita, spaghetti, lumpiang Shanghai and chicken macaroni. And there was cake and fruit salad for dessert. Her brothers were scoffing food down like wolves starving in the winter. They seemed to constantly be hungry. When they weren't eating, they were playing on the PlayStation with their cousins. The men congregated outside in the back garden to drink beer. A karaoke machine was set up and everyone was taking turns with it. Emo was helping herself to her second plate of fruit salad. The women were all talking in the kitchen. I heard Susanna is spending Christmas alone, Grandma Lord said. Doesn't she have family she can visit? Aunt Jo asked. They're all in Port Salt, Mo's mother answered. And that's an 8-hour drive. Grandma sighed. We did say she could still come spend Christmas with us regardless of what happened with Felix. She must be embarrassed, Aunt Jo remarked. It sounded really sad. As much as Mo's family could drive her insane, she couldn't imagine not spending the holidays with them. Susanna had been Auntie Sue since she was little, and it was weird not to have her there. Maybe we can bring her some food, Emo suggested. We do have a lot.
Mo's mom smiled.
That's a great idea, Nay. They packed enough food to feed 3 people. Susanna could put the leftovers in the fridge and have food for the next day. Emo put on a jacket and picked up the paper bag filled with Tupperware. While it never snowed, it did get cold at night. She would have to walk fast down the street and back. She was a few feet from the house when Uncle Felix caught up to her. Where are you going, Nay? She hesitated before answering, bringing Noche Buena to Susanna. Why didn't you say so? He gestured for her to follow. Come on. Susanna's house was at the end of the street. It was a small 2-bedroom house with no Christmas decorations. She and Uncle Felix used to live in a bigger house before it was sold after the divorce. You should give it to her, Uncle Felix said. She doesn't want to see me. I'll stand over there. He stood several feet from the house, hidden in the shadows. Chase was barking through the front door. Emo waited until Susanna opened the door. The older woman looked surprised. What are you doing here, Nay? She asked. It's the middle of the night. Emo handed her the large paper bag. Just bringing you Noche Buena. It's the usual stuff, even the same chocolate cake. Susanna's face dropped. You didn't have to do this. It's not a big deal. We always make enough food to feed a whole neighborhood anyway. Susanna smiled gratefully. You always were such a sweet kid. Thank you. No problem. Emo smiled back. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Emo. Susanna paused before calling out. And Merry Christmas to you too, Felix. Emo swore she could see him freeze like a statue. How did you know he was there? I was married to him for over 15 years, Susanna replied. You should get back home. Good night. Good night. Susanna closed the front door and Emo practically sprinted towards where Uncle Felix had been trying to hide. How does she do that?
Montag questioned.
I've been asking myself the same question for over 15